back to the music itself. When I think of sludge,
Yeah.
I think of long, slow songs, bands like Sleep, Windhand, where like 8 minutes might be considered short. Your music, though, a lot of it is in like the 2-minute range. It's like punk sludge, and I love it. It's so different. Where did this tight style of sludge develop for you?
Well, sludge is an interesting category because it seems to be more of a vibe than anything else. There is definitely, like you mentioned, the song length, the tones, the nature of the riffs. There's a bunch of things that contribute to it. But what's interesting about it from an artistic perspective is that sludge, unlike many other genres, is not hyper specific. Like there isn't, do the sludge thing. Like if you do the stoner rock riff, for some reason, people automatically will assume that that means a Black Sabbath style bouncy riff. And blues minor, and most people will know exactly what you're talking about and be able to play it. I'm not like, I love those riffs. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just using it as an example. Or country music, play country. Well, country, like we know exactly what country sounds like, or at least we think we know. And there's a thing that makes country sound like what it sounds like. But sludge is a little less defined that way. It's more of like a vibe than it is a specific, organization of sounds, or performance standards, performance techniques. So artistically, it's a little bit more fun to work with, and it can exist in fast. The beats can be fast. There's a bunch of ways you can make things sort of sludgy. And there's a bunch of eras of bands that have sort of contributed to this sludge idea. And, it starts with that band Trouble and Black Sabbath. And I don't know if you know Trouble. They're much lesser known. But
No, I haven't heard of them.
Same era as Black Sabbath. Okay. But it starts there, and then it starts moving up the ladder, and you have like Venom and what could I use as examples in the medium term? I don't have anything off like 90s, like Melvins.
Okay. Yeah.
And then like 2000s, you have Black Sheep Wall. I'm not sure if you know them. They're a Midwest kind of band. Yeah. And Admiral Angry and whatnot. But each era of this sludge thing is quite different. And it's almost like at every sort of stage of the sludge, the progression of the sludge vibe, they leave stuff behind in every era. They leave a big set of traits that would maybe define most genres. People just leave it behind. But the thing that always is ever present is this vibe. And I can't say whether or not that I capture the vibe, but I'm definitely motivated by the vibe. And so that's where I'm coming from. Where I'm landing, I'm not sure. That's up to the listener to decide. But yeah, so I'm coming from this sludge angle, but I come from punk rock. I grew up on Minor Threat and Black Flag and 2-minute songs and that urgency and this whole idea like this, I'm going to play the song like my life depended on it type thing. And the only thing I have is a voice in this world. You feel very powerless in this world at times. And sometimes just like screaming at a wall, in the words of Minor Threat, is seemingly all you have. So that urgency from the punk era has always been with me, and it's always been interesting. Everything I've ever done musically, I've applied that to it. So it doesn't matter if it's sludge or otherwise. I'm probably always going to do super short songs. And yeah.
That's great. Hey, sometimes if you said all you need to say in 2 minutes, why say anymore? That's great.
I agree.
Yeah. And I guess it's sludge. You can think of it kind of like grunge, I guess, where Nirvana's playing punk and Soundgarden's playing metal and Pearl Jam is playing, 70s rock.
That's a great.
But it all got fit under one umbrella for whatever reason. There was something that's really undefinable, and the word just happened to be grunge that everyone used. So is that kind of the same way you think about sludge?
I think that's a great. It's funny. I've never even contemplated that parallel, but that's probably the best parallel in terms of like another musical example of the same thing. And arguably within the grunge thing, like all those bands totally fit together. But you're right. Like what I love about it is they all have a very unique delivery. Like they sound nothing alike, which I prefer,
Yeah.
Artistically, like as a listener and as a person who makes things.
We both grew up in a time where making money as a rock musician was seen as selling out. Marketing was icky. But thankfully, at least I think this is a good thing. We're seeing a shift where younger artists are realizing that if you provide something of value, in this case, entertainment, musical enjoyment, you should be compensated for it so that you can keep doing what you love and so that you can share it with more people. Did you have that anti-sellout mentality growing up?
I really did. You know, going back to the whole punk thing, like I was very much inside of a lot of the ideas being shared in there. Like, do it for the art, do it for the community, do things that cost. This is not about being a business, all that kind of stuff. And I think like so many of those values are have a lot of value in them. Like so many of those ideas and philosophies have a lot of value inside of them. But like, I think they're important to be aware of, important to consider, to look at the world through those lenses, through those perspectives. But I don't think it's smart to anything that is counter to you surviving is just not a good idea.
Right.
And it surprises me. Like, I guess, from between the 80s and the 90s, there was like a big recessionary period in Canada. I think there was also in the United States, because that was the big shift of manufacturing moving overseas. Throughout the whole 90s period, all the factories in Canada and the United States started drying up and a lot of production started moving overseas. And so jobs started changing, but there was still a lot of comfort. There was enough people who had accumulated enough wealth, even in the middle class, that people like myself, like I didn't grow up wealthy by any standard. And it's not like my parents bought me guitars and all these kinds of things. Like I did have a little bit of that. Like I was very fortunate a couple times to, have some of those resources accessible. But most of my friends, it was just like, oh, I want to take up this. And they're like, oh, bam. I'm like, God damn. They're so like, I wish I had that. But, that whole 80s, 90s period, there was this whole movement of youth that saw their parents, in toil for this unknown end for retirement and then die. And there was a lot of unrest about the process, like what my purpose in life and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there was this level of comfort, all these young people who really didn't understand how hard things could be. They were like 2 generations removed from the Depression and just didn't understand poverty. Of course, there are people in our society then and now who know the realities of poverty to a significant degree. Like there are problems with poverty then and now, but there was a huge class of people in that period that were very comfortable. And I think a lot of those ideas come out of that, the dissatisfaction, the disenfranchised idea of like, what is the purpose of all this stuff? We're going through this educational system being churned out as workers into a world of jobs going away, like everything's going out of business, but we're still pretty comfortable. And I don't want to be like my parents, but I don't know what my path forward is. And yeah, there was just like a lot of youth revolt. So that stuff, I think it came fairly, you know, it was a lot of like the Gen Xers and the Gen Y folks. It's just like, what is happening? What is this world that we live in? We don't even understand it. And so it was a reaction to all that kind of stuff. But like someone like myself, I carried a lot of it forward for a long time. And I was highly idealistic about, you know, making money off of my art and all this sort of stuff, or at least uncomfortable with it. Probably about 15 years ago, I was like, okay, we got to give things a price, and we got to get to the next town. So we need to put gas in the tank. The reality is we need to make some money. But I really didn't fully embrace that until very recently, where, you know, a couple of years ago, it's already about 10 years ago, I started a business. It was a print company, a print design agency. And in that company, I didn't have any attachment to what we were doing. It was purely, I just got laid off from a job. And then I started a company exactly in the same space as the company I got laid off from. And I was just out to prove a point and take all their business. And so it's a little bit, you know, it was a bit of a dick move kind of business. But it was a great experience in terms of like suddenly seeing things like business and marketing from a completely different perspective. Like, I got laid off and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to make some money now. And I had all these bills, like more bills than I had ever had previous in my life, you know, adult bills, just normal adult life. But I never really had to face them in this way before. And so I did that business as a necessity, and I grew it really fast. And I learned a ton of stuff about business because it was a fight, you know, fight or flight or whatever, like a do or die situation. And I'm just like, oh, like money, there's no problems with money. Money is just money. People can be good or bad, but like money is indifferent. Money is not good or bad. And what you do with money is, you know, you can do a lot of good things with money. And the more comfortable that you are, the more you can do for somebody else. And I just like saw all these things like very matter of fact. And also marketing, you know, I'm like, oh, marketing, you can do it any way you want. You don't have to follow the marketing rule book. You can be totally disruptive in marketing. You can be totally disruptive in business. Business can be whatever you want. It's a extremely creative thing. And it was actually astonishing to me that I was so on the outside of those ideas that I couldn't see those ideas at all. But you know, you don't really understand those things until you're faced with them. You don't really fully get inside of them until you're faced with having to operate a business and also having to make that business successful, not only in dollars, but successful in that I like doing it.
Right.
Like that's an important factor of success. Like, do I enjoy going to this job every day? And did I buy myself a job, or is this something that I'm excited to build? And I think if you bought yourself a job by getting into business, I don't think it's going to work generally. I think you need to have some enthusiasm to make it work. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong there. But see, that seems to be the case in all the success stories that I do know of.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's great that more people are realizing you can do this. You can make money without without selling your soul, without compromising your beliefs or being greedy. But you made a really good point about you're able to do more good when you have money. You don't want to be in a position where you see some good cause and you're like, man, I'd love to donate to them and help them out, but I can't pay my rent if I do that. You don't want to be in that position. No. So, yeah.